News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moskow.
Karen, we begin this morning in China, where President Xi Jinping is asserting his country's power and growing influence with a once-a-decade military parade. The event marks the first public appearance among Xi, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Speaking through an interpreter, President Xi said China aims to stand self-reliant and that his country remains unshaken by threats.
The Chinese nation is a great nation that is never intimidated by any bullies and always values independence and forges ahead. In the past, when faced with critical struggles between good and evil, light and darkness, progress and reaction, the Chinese people rallied together to defy the enemy.
Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke through an interpreter there after Russia's energy giant Gazprom said it signed a legally binding agreement to build a major gas pipeline to China through Mongolia.
On social media, Nathan, President Trump is responding to China's military demonstration, writing, quote, "Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America." The president did not elaborate on his accusation. President Trump recently told reporters in the Oval Office that the parade did not pose a threat to the U.S. power and publicly expressed confidence China would not aim its military at the U.S. But Bloomberg's Stephen Engel is in Beijing and says the message from China is clear.
This is the 80th anniversary of the victory of World War II, that China really wants to tell the West that, yes, China contributed to that victory over the Japanese as well as the Nazis in Europe to probably a lesser extent. But again, it's also a great chance for China to roll out its latest modern weaponry.
Bloomberg's Stephen Engel is reporting from Tiananmen Square, where the parade took place.
Well, back here in the U.S., Karen, the focus is on tariffs. President Trump says he's going to ask the Supreme Court for an expedited ruling to overturn a federal court decision that many of his tariffs were illegally imposed. The president says it's essential to keep his trade policy intact, saying it would be a devastation for our country, in his words, if the appeals court rulings left in place. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit ruled President Trump wrongfully invoked an emergency law for the tariffs he imposed on imports from dozens of trading partners.
Let's turn to the Fed now, Nathan. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is planning to interview candidates this Friday to replace Jay Powell as Federal Reserve Chair. The Wall Street Journal says Bessent will talk to candidates either in person or by video conference, with 11 people in the running for the role. Robert Kaplan, Vice Chairman at Goldman Sachs and former Dallas Fed President, says it's to be expected.
Jay Powell's term as chairman ends in May, and so it makes sense that they should start the interview process. I think the main thing for the leader, the next leader of the Fed, has to be somebody who has strong grounding in economics and can make independent judgments about the economy.
Robert Kaplan was speaking exclusively to Bloomberg from the Goldman Sachs Asia Leaders Conference in Hong Kong.
And we have an update, Karen, on President Trump's move to oust Fed Governor Lisa Cook. Her lawyer says the president's actions are based on nothing more than cut-and-paste allegations of mortgage fraud in social media posts. The lawyer argues the president lacks valid grounds to fire Cook for cause, that she did not commit fraud. Cook's lawyers are seeking a temporary ruling to preserve the status quo and allow her to continue performing her duties while the legal fight goes forward.
Let's turn to the markets now. In the global bond sell-off, Nathan, the yield on 30-year U.S. Treasuries rose close to 5%, and long-dated European and Japanese bond yields also rose, with Japan's 20-year note climbing to its highest level since 1999. Eric Lonergan, discretionary macro head at Calibrate Partners, tells Bloomberg he's concerned about the slump in long bonds.
We're starting to get something approximating panic. A lot of this has got to do with bond markets breaking through levels and the market being de-anchored in terms of how to price them. I think there's two things to be aware of. One is that the prevailing narratives really don't add up, right? So most of the narrative is about public sector debt levels and debt issuance. And that really doesn't stack up, because if you look at this, it's a global phenomenon, and yet the public sector debt issues isn't a global phenomenon. Now, something has changed in Japan, however, and I think that has kind of been the catalyst for very considerable levels of contagion. What's changed in Japan has been inflation.
Eric Lonergan with Calibre Partners says traders are also contending with a range of concerns from public debt, inflation, tariffs, and an assault on Federal Reserve independence.
In Hong Kong, Karen, Bloomberg News is reporting that authorities are probing allegations of insider trading involving at least 2 individuals at the stock exchange and the city's financial regulator, as well as brokers and social media influencers. Authorities are investigating if regulatory staff tipped off traders and others to upcoming announcements involving dozens of listed companies. Sources tell us the probes have been ongoing for months, with unexplained price spikes having long been a source of concern in Hong Kong.
In company news, Nathan, a major win for tech giant Google. A federal judge ruled yesterday Google does not have to sell its popular Chrome web browser. Mandeep Singh of Bloomberg Intelligence says the decision was surprising.
Judge Mehta was in favor of divesting Chrome, which is the key asset here that everyone is looking at. And in this case, I think the ruling clearly states that they're not required to divest Chrome. At the same time, there won't be any exclusive contracts. So that means the Google-Apple thing won't be at least allowed anymore.
Bloomberg's Mandeep Singh says Google is required to share online search data with rivals and cannot dictate that device makers take all its apps to access the Google Play Store on Android. In a statement, Google praised the judgment for recognizing how AI has changed the search industry, but said the company continues to disagree with an earlier ruling that it monopolizes online search. And checking shares of Google this morning, they are up almost 6%. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moskow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.